There was a inventor. He had passed away about 2 years ago now, that had a device that people could go in. It was like an 8x8 octagon room, and so I'm going to get to the studies in a moment. But allegedly, I mean, I used it. I had my family use it as well, several times, and spent on and off time with this gentleman, experiencing the device, but also, just chatting with him and the people that worked with him to really understand, what was happening and what was going on here. They would have people from a local medical school that was nearby bring some of their toughest patients, the patients that didn't have hope left, to sit in this device to feel it and to experience it. What I was told is that, and by the way, this gentleman had this device for many years. It wasn't just like a one-off type of a thing. And, I mean, we're talking years and years. A lot of people knew about this device and would go there, but, you didn't share it too much publicly because, you didn't want somebody coming in and saying, because the big problem in this field is you can't say that you're curing something. You do that, you get, right, from your legal background, you get in trouble. So what they had to do.
But one's called the sun cell, which can directly generate electricity from the reaction of hydrogen and water. And his theory is that it's a hydrogen changing to dark matter. Well, theories are theories, but the results are what matter. But it's been independently validated in other places at several universities.
Like, go without having so many different things to build what they feel like they're here to build and to create what they feel like they're here to create. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. You don't see something like this very often. The people that are dedicated to this are very charged with what they're doing and how they're doing it, and that needs to be handled with care. The capacity for us to connect in with each other, to respect self as equitable to other, which is kind of like EI 101, is a large part of how we're going to get there. So,
Man, I sure could go for some power food right now. Oh, hey, lucky for me, I've got some plant-based power food vitality from onnit.com. ONNIT.com. Check out their power food vitality blend. It's amazing. Power Food Vitality utilizes chia and flax to help balance out the body's omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio, an important target for regulating inflammatory responses throughout the day. Also, both chia and flax are known to be great for digestive health and elimination, ensuring you feel optimized from the inside out. Acai is included because it is one of the most antioxidant-abundant berries in the world, and it provides the perfect natural balance to the creamy vanilla flavor. It's keto-friendly and sweetened with mesquite and all-natural stevia. A scoop of Vitality makes a delicious addition to smoothies and foods, but is also great on its own in plain old water. So check it out, and check out all their other good stuff at onnit.com. Enter code Philosophical Minds at checkout to save yourself up to 10% off any and all supplements.
The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about
and other things.
All right, we are here with Susan Manewich and Jeane Manning. Jeane is an author who has written a ton of books about energy breakthroughs, some of which include The Coming Energy Revolution, Breakthrough Power. She's spent 30 plus years interviewing scientists and inventors on various continents. She's been a social worker, journalist, and publicist as well. Jeane, along with our other guest, Susan, have co-authored a book called Hidden Energy. Susan is the president of New Energy Movement. She's experienced in the field of leadership development, organizational development, resonant technology, and consciousness. She got her master's degree in science, focusing on organizational behavior and development. She is founder and director of the Nui Foundation for Moral Technology and serves as an advisor for the Tipping Point, as well as a research advisor for the CCRI, Consciousness and Contact Research Initiative. She's co-authored work in Emotional Intelligence in Everyday Life, Psychology Press, New York, 2006, and Applied Emotional Intelligence, Psychology Press, New York, 2007. So yeah, together, her and Jeane and Susan have co-authored a book called Hidden Energy, and we're excited to have them here today to discuss hidden energy related topics. So welcome, Jeane, and welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Sky.
I think it's refreshing to have some feminine energy trickling into this field. I guess in your case, Jeane, you've kind of been at this for years, but I think together you guys make an excellent team and are coming at it from a pretty unique angle. You guys co-founded a foundation that's a community interest company in Europe.
Susan did.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was both of you or what, but that's to allow for a greater international collaboration in the field of new energy technology, research and development, as well as manufacturing. So I guess to start, can you tell me a little bit about that company and some of the goals that you have with it?
Sure. Yeah, sure. It would be great to also share how Jeane and I got together to work on this because so even though I am the co-director of the Nui Foundation, where I met Jeane, had to do with being part of and coming into New Energy movement, which had and has a history of, I would say, doing a lot of the legwork and breaking through to organize these type of technologies with inventors and business people. And obviously, Jeane's background and knowledge has been just absolutely essential to the development and the furthering of both of these organizations. So it's just one of the things that I hope that we get into a little bit more. New Energy Movement is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3 in the United States, and it's been in existence for almost 15 years, started by Dr. Brian O'Leary. And that's where we have a lot of our public education and advocacy in reference to these type of technologies. In the last couple of years, I was asked to run the organization. And what we've done is we've tried to understand the need for diversification of people being involved in this arena, and that this is for everybody. So therefore, lots of different people should be represented in this arena. Again, not just a certain type of inventor or inventors, but really, making this applicable and appealable to everyone. And this is one of the reasons that the book was written in the manner that it was, that I'm sure Jeane will go into in a little bit more detail. But what we did last year, I think it was last year, as we just hit in 2020, we formalized, and I work with a colleague who's in the UK, and we said, we have so many inventors that are in Europe and in the UK, so is there a way that we can further expand what we're doing to serve the needs that are happening over there? And we decided to start a community interest company, which is a little bit like a 501c3 here in the United States. Some differences, some similarities, yet the profit that is made in a in a CIC actually goes towards community projects. So it's not, basically, you can't get rich off of this. And one of the things that we believe is that the way that the living ecosystem of these technologies, that they're held in from a legal standpoint, a financial standpoint, consciousness standpoint, is really important. It was one of the big things that we saw missing. We saw money being given to technology and given to inventors, and then we saw the energy that went along with that. And it's kind of like, how can you birth these new energy technologies in really an old broken system? It seems like there's something that's not jiving there from a coherency standpoint. So that's one of the reasons that we started that organization.
Beautiful. I love it.
Well put.
And it's fascinating to me how many people generally have no idea about these potentials of these technologies, and it's really where it's at, in my opinion. You bring up words like ether, orgone, radiant energy, Brill, and you kind of get blank stares. But on the other hand, I think, like as opposed to 10 years ago, if you brought some of this stuff up, you'd probably get laughed at. But it appears now people are at least more open-minded and interested in listening to what's possible. And as you mentioned, Susan, in one of your previous talks, with the advent of social media, it's really shedding some positive light on what's possible. I mean, we see things like Commander Fravor going on Joe Rogan talking about the Tic Tac shaped UFO footage, and then there's the gimbal UFO footage, or some of the insane activity going on at places like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. So these forms of advanced technologies are getting exposure, whether these are crafts being operated by some extraterrestrial entities or some intelligence agencies behind the scenes or whatever. They do exist without a doubt, and the way they operate do not appear to conform to our standard academic understanding of the so-called laws of physics. So on that note, as you are somewhat of a gap bridger between the academic world and the alternative energy field, how are you seeing this play out in the academic realm, and how are they responding to all this emerging data?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. When we say academic realm, there's more than just the professors, right? I mean, you've got students in colleges, you've got the administration that's in colleges, you've got parents that pay for their kids to go to college, as I will be doing shortly with my daughter. And so there's a lot of interested parties other than just the professors, right? That are in colleges. I spent some time over the last couple of months visiting a few colleges to discuss with them about the Hidden Energy book, and the level of receptivity was extremely high. And I will quote what was said to me from one of the administrators at the college was, "We can't seem to keep up with the pace that students are learning outside of academia, outside of the college setting. We can't keep up with it." And they feel that a lot of their professors are not equipped to speak the same language that their students are coming in with. So they're really challenging the status quo continuously. And also the administrators are challenging the status quo. They may be doing it quietly, but that's still happening. Those thought processes are still there, questioning physics, questioning, our financial systems, questioning even, what's happening and going on with things like the climate right now. So, things that used to be taboo to be able to be discussed in these college settings are now giving way to have greater discussion, because I think it's the pressure is forcing from so many different avenues and so many different directions that people can't, close their eyes to it anymore. So, what you asked about bridging some of these gaps here. The students are doing it. Some of the academics are doing it. We work with academics as well on a consistent basis. We have a project going on with NEM right now with individuals at a university that's going to be out in the next couple of months. And they're the ones that are the brave ones. They're the ones that are the catalysts. So they help us to put things in a certain way that's more amenable to the academic crowd to understand, and we help them by giving them a voice that they would not typically have within their university. So that's just some of it. Jeane, I'm wondering, because you've seen this over the years with certain individuals within academic institutions that have been, champions for this work. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you've seen shift and change over the years.
Right. When I first started going to these non-conventional energy conferences, some 30 years ago or so, there were hardly any people there who were actively working in academia. There were retired academics, but anybody who valued their career at the time stayed far, far away. And it's still to some extent but it has changed somewhat. And Susan and I have gone to some of the energy science and technology conferences in northern Idaho. For example, there's one called, one in Hayden, Idaho, yearly. And I've seen even that over the last 10 years evolve. And now some of the speakers, more of the speakers have PhDs than ever before. More often, it's the retired professors who have the courage to come out, because it's not a problem to their careers to be associated with. It may be a problem in their peer group of their friends from academia, saying, "What are you doing, looking in that direction?" But remember this last summer, there was a retired Los Alamos National Lab PhD scientist who gave a talk that was really kind of paradigm changing for the people who were trying to understand the theory of how these devices can work. A certain type of device, the something like Jim Murray's switched energy resonant power supply, how that sort of thing can actually be explained in terms that are common in the scientific world. So yes, things have definitely changed. There's also a few more women. It's still a man's world, in that if you would look out through an audience, but excuse me. But I was about the only one in the room at the time who wasn't attached to some man as their partner in the early days. But now there are women who also show up just because they too want to learn. It's something that we can all understand the basics, the simple basics of how it would be possible to work more in harmony with nature. And how to put those into words is something that the inventors and engineers that are leaders in the field are working to agree on some general principles. So there's not, a handbook yet saying this is the Coles Notes version of the new energy field, but they're working on refining their language so that it harmonizes more with standard science.
Yeah,
but it's still going to be a leap into something different, and we need a dramatic transformation of our energy system. So humankind needs a different outlook where we're not relying on burning fuels, not what's called the fireplace technologies of
absolutely
fuel burning and nuclear power plants.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And yeah, I've talked with Jim Murray. He's a fascinating guy. And so, yeah, as someone who's, you've been into this for about 30 years or so, do you think these technologies are threatening to fossil fuel corporations over the years? Have you seen anything that would indicate them trying to discredit or hinder progress in this direction in any way? Or are there any other forms of suppression that have taken place over the years, to your knowledge?
Oh, yes. There's definitely less of the overt starting a fire in someone's lab sorts of things that have gone on in the past, or the threats to a lone inventor, because there aren't that many lone inventors anymore. People are connected, and so you can't just go out and intimidate somebody who lives in who doesn't have the support of a community, because they can report this immediately online. But there's still the money goes in the other direction for sure.
Right.
And the everybody's eyes are steered into another direction. If you get all your information from mainstream media, popular science magazines, or articles, well, you're not going to be pointed towards the non-conventional field for sure.
Definitely. And yet, Susan, on that note, I want to talk about the psychological aspects of your work in this area. I'm really interested in both the alternative energy sciences as well as psychology. So seeing how those connect is super interesting to me. So in terms of, emotional intelligence, strategy, and communication, in what ways does emotional intelligence play a role, and how can strategy and communication be applied to foster innovation?
That's a great question. Well, so from an emotional intelligence perspective, just to define it, there's multiple definitions of it, over the years as people expand, and, kind of put their own spin on it. But the way that I learned it was actually from the originators in the field. They were my colleagues, specifically David Caruso, who's at Yale University. There's a test called the Mayer-Salve-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. A short name for it is the Mesquite. And I specialized with that test and did a lot of training and development all around the world, mostly with large corporations and well-known academic institutions. And we did some, not just training, but we would assess people before, assess them during trainings, and then afterwards. So there was some, research papers that were written in regards to the effectiveness. So, you have a better handle on how things are really going and working, with your intervention that you provide with the EI. Um, so I feel comfortable in saying certain things here. So emotional intelligence is the capacity to accurately identify emotions, understand how that emotion influences thought, understand what triggers that emotion, and to manage emotion. So basically to use emotion consciously, judiciously, to be aware of the emotion and what's happening. So it's kind of like, if you're in a bad mood, do you go with the energy of being in a bad mood and let everybody feel the effects of it, or do you hold back and say, this isn't fair for someone else to feel X, Y, or Z? So that's kind of a basic understanding of it. But how it relates to this field, so I basically, I'm laughing a little bit. I basically came from what I would call the field of EI, doing that on a daily basis, did it for over a decade, and doing emotional intelligence consulting in organizations, organizational development, leadership development with high performing folks. And what I found is in this field there was a relationship between what I would call advanced ways of knowing and emotion. So this is where there was like the crux of intuition really coming into play. So when I would do work in corporations, you weren't talking about intuition too much, because things are more prescriptive in an organization, typically, at least, back in the day it was. So in this field, what I was seeing is there was a place for things like insight, synchronicity, um, extraordinary experiences, higher forms of consciousness. So, that was one of the things that seemed to be more predominant. And how do you work with that type of knowing, right? So how do you work with people that have that type of knowing? Because when someone has an extraordinary or a spiritual type of experience, and then they feel like, they're on mission to deliver this, sometimes the emotional intelligence gets lost, or maybe it was not really even there. Just because there's great ideas and great insights in these deep wisdoms that come through folks, being able to actually land that in this world and communicate that to other people to actually create something that works, or to even get off the idea couch and to find a way to make that happen. That's that's a to do. So what I really saw when I came into this field was that there needs to be a combination of respecting individuals' deep experiences that they have, because a lot of these creations will come from, and this is in the book, and Jeane can talk about this too, comes from dream state, comes from meditation, comes from a knowing. Some people say, geez, I remember doing these things in my past life, and I'm here to finish the job, or I'm here to do it better this time around. I hurt people, and I need to not create something that's hurting someone this time around. I was foolish with what I did. I mean, you really hear everything under the sun. Some people will say, I came here because I felt the call to be on this planet during this time, during this shift. So, there's a lot of charge that goes in with that. And being able to show that we are all in this together, that there is a collaborative aspect to this whole thing, and that your ideas can be your ideas are important, yet so aren't other people's. And maybe the capacity for us to connect in with each other, to respect self as equitable to other, which is kind of like EI 101, is a large part of how we're going to get there. So I know that was a long answer. There's so much to that. I feel like there's probably like 5 research papers you can write on that alone in this arena, because again, you're talking about people that feel this great and deep passion for what they do. I mean, how many people will work for free over years and give like go without having so many different things to build what they feel like they're here to build and to create what they feel like they're here to create? I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. You don't see something like this very often. The people that are dedicated to this are very charged with what they're doing and how they're doing it, and that needs to be handled with care.
Right, yeah. And so how are some of the engineers and inventors responding to this information?
They
Great.
responded well at the conference, Susan.
Yeah, great, because you know what, you take it out of the realm of tech. Granted, that's what we see, right? But what led to that technology, what led to it typically is a trust within themselves, a trust within Mother Nature and the cosmos. Like there's this relationship that happens with these inventors in their creation, and you take that and you create a space that's safe, respectful, collaborative, trustworthy, and you acknowledge them as people, and you acknowledge that there's a better way to go about this, and that you're not trying to take something from someone, that there's that there is an interconnection here and there is a relationship, and you get a whole different response as a result. You get a whole different energy as a result. So I would say it's just been needed, and maybe to take it out of the intellectual realm and just throw it into it's a nurturing that's been needed, that hasn't really been in this arena. It's been cloak and dagger, a lot of we hear about the secrecy aspect, the suppression, this happened and that happened. It's kind of like this that type of energy that's gone along with this. But what if we flipped it around and we talk about the beauty of it, and we talk about what it can do, and talk about it with it being in alignment with nature? What if we had a bit more of a yin insertion in there, and to hold that space? What does that then look like? And it looks a lot nicer. So
Definitely. And you brought up the collaboration, and either one of you could tell me a little bit about the role these incubator labs play into the innovation of some of these technologies. What exactly is an incubator lab?
Well, we're not going, I don't know about any formal municipal or regional or state or national governments that are providing the incubator labs. Susan can tell you about what's going on with the teams that she's been working with.
Oh, definitely.
So basically what we do is we look at the most promising technology, and we work to incubate those. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And obviously some of that's confidential. I can't share that out publicly yet. When we can, we will. But you take, again, the most promising technology, the people, and we work to pull that together in a way that has collaboration, and again, trust, has all the conscious good integrity pieces at play. And this is one of the things that we're doing in order to try to move the technologies along, to ultimately get those to people. But it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of conversation and a lot of development. And yes, it does take finances as well. So that's one of the things that's happening and going on. But there's multiple labs all over the world, mostly on smaller scales, that are doing this as well. So it's not just us.
That's another thing that changed over the years too, because inventors by nature are quite independent. So to have the collaboration that we have these days is a wonderful step forward, and it doesn't just happen by itself. It has to be facilitated, helped to be created by the people that see who could be brought together and where and how. And so this is just a whole aspect of the field that I think that shows that we're at maybe a higher step in the evolution of the whole field at a time when the planet needs this so much, and this will bring things to the marketplace a lot faster.
Definitely. And you mentioned like Jim Moray's switched energy resonance power supply, and what are some other promising breakthroughs that you've observed over the span of your research?
One thing that does involve a lab that really brings in some pretty heavy duty scientific credentials is Brilliant Light Power Company. They can afford to have a team that they hire which is really unusual. They've been able to raise money over the years to have a very well equipped lab, and so the invention that has come out of that, Dr. Randall Mills is Inventor, and he's got a couple of versions, but one's called the sun cell, which can directly generate electricity from the reaction of hydrogen and water, and his theory is that it's a hydrogen changing to dark matter. Well, theories are theories, but the results are what matter. But it's been independently validated in other places at several universities recently, just this last couple of months, that others have said, yes, you are getting megawatt levels of power density from just a little bit of water. So he says that the amount of water that could come from humidity in the air would be enough for a sun cell to tap into. And so it's the fact that they have money to hire their own scientists to develop the prototypes, but also that he has the academic credentials to be able to reach out to university labs where others are validating, and they're all courageous. The people at the universities who have been the first to test his inventions. It takes a little bit of guts to take on something like that is disruptive, potentially, and certainly to the status quo that wants us to think there's such a limited spectrum of energy possibilities, where they're saying that we just have to continue to have this mix that includes fossil fuels and nuclear power reactors, because they say that I'm talking about now the International Energy Agency and there are other hacks who say that we don't have any choice. We have to continue to create it, to use a mix of dirty energy.
Yeah,
not true.
That's interesting. That sun cell technology seems really compelling. I wanted to get into the ether a little bit. So in the late 1880s, American scientists Albert Michelson and Edward Morley did some experiments with something called an interferometer. And also, I believe Dayton Miller did some ether drift experiments as well. Can you talk a little bit about what took place with all of that and how Michelson's ether is possibly compatible with Einstein's relativity theory? Because I think Tesla believed that Einstein's theory of curved space-time made no sense, and a lot of the guys that I've talked to have some definite criticism of Einstein's theory as well. So I'm curious from both of you, what's kind of your take on that whole situation?
I definitely think it should be examined with an open mind, and look at the results of Dayton Miller's experiments. I mean, he was a very, very highly respected scientist and head of, I think, a physics department at one university. and member of all the scientific societies respected, and he did very careful replications of the Michelson-Morley experiment, and without trying to go into the ins and outs of how they measured direction of if there's some movement of the ether in the background or what. Just the bottom line is it does call into question at most points in his life Einstein saying that there's no such thing as ether, and you have these limitations. However, toward the end of his life, he did write a letter to a colleague, and it's on record that he doubted everything that he'd said about that topic, and really doubted the final conclusions that people have come to by citing him. Of course, he's been put on a pedestal, and there's a lot to love about Albert Einstein for sure. But when you look at the way things are spun in the textbooks and the media, and when somebody is just elevated and elevated and elevated, and everybody has to make sure that they see that person as the hero of the 20th century, you have to kind of wonder about their spin. And if you look back, you see that there is a definite spin. There's a spin in science, popular science magazines that every so often, number of years, have to run an article about the ridiculous perpetual motion machines that have been tried down through the ages and show pictures of some crazy apparatus, and we all have a good chuckle about how ignorant they were. And so it's been drilled into people's heads so thoroughly, the limitations have been drilled in so thoroughly. I was talking with some people, and there was a man who had majored in engineering way back when. I'm not sure which branch of engineering, I think it was electronic, and then went into some other field. But anyway, he was so programmed in the mechanistic thinking that he didn't even want to hear anything. He just said, but I'm an engineer. That's end of story. So they've been educated in the mechanistic way of thinking, which is just that anything that isn't a physiochemical cause just couldn't be real. Everything is limited to just a certain number of physiochemical causes and effects, and that's that. So anything that can't be explained that way just doesn't exist. Mechanistic, reductionistic, or some descriptions of the old way of thinking that everybody has been programmed into so thoroughly that they wouldn't even dare to say that they would question certain things.
Definitely. Susan, do you share that same perspective, or is there anything you would add?
Yeah, I think Jeane nailed it really well. I think what I would add is that I think we're being asked to understand our relationship with energy within ourselves and with how we look at the world around us and extract energy and what we use it for. I mean, when you look and see the environmental damage that's been done in a whole host of different ways just by, taking Mother Earth's resources and using them without care, without connection, just tying it to profit alone. I think we're seeing that there's a tipping point, right? And we may have gone beyond that at this point. So I think we're really being asked to look at what we've created, how we created it. Is that the real story? Is that the whole story? And I think what we're seeing is it's not the whole story, right? And there are people that are doing good experiments out there. I typically refer to the work of the Sapphire Project and some of the things that they're doing, because it's good research and it's information that they do share with the public when they can. once it's passed their mustard test, and there's been several layers of validation to that. But basically what they do is they replicate the atmosphere of the sun in a lab, and what they've been able to understand and learn from that, it blows a lot of the textbook knowledge out of the water. So I would say this. I would say that I think we're really beginning to ask, we're being asked to understand the relationship of energy with ourselves, how we heal, how we get sick, what is our relationship to nature, what is our relationship to the world around us, but also what do we create from that? Understanding what that relationship is, and what we create from that. I think that's a very open arena right now, and I think that we'll probably be humbled by some of the things that we discover and see, and that is some of the work of the Sapphire Project. What they've seen is they said we're being humbled by nature right now.
Yeah, I have to check that out. Now, you mentioned in some of those sentences you used the phrase "the tipping point," and I noticed you're an advisor for something called the Tipping Point. What exactly is that?
It's an organization that was formed a little while ago. That's part of a group called Earthwise, and by the way, Jeane is also associated with a group that's similar to this, not exactly the same, but they're in Canada. And what it is understanding that the world is at this shift right now, and there's a certain percentage of people that may be on that precipice of waking up and being able to expose them to a whole host of different things. New science is one of those things, like the work that we do and the Hidden Energy book, but also through sound. Believing and understanding that great change does take place through, harmonic resonance, through song. And so this is the work of the Tipping Point, where there's a collaboration of a variety of different groups that come together to work to bring solutions to people in places around the globe that typically wouldn't get it. So it's in the process of forming. There's websites that you can look at. There's the Earthwise website, but there's also a Tipping Point website that's there. So more to come on that. It's still a bit in its earlier stages, but I like a lot of what they're doing. HeartMath is associated with this group. Purdue University is working on an app for this group as well. So the goal is to be able to get this to communities all around the globe that typically wouldn't be able to get exposed to a lot of these new and different ideas, but the avenue for this is through music festivals. So again, more to come on that. It's a bit in its earlier stages.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I've heard of that HeartMath. Is that anything in relation to Dan Winter, or is that something separate?
That's separate, right, Jeane?
Yeah, HeartMath centered in California. I love their experiments that show that we're all interconnected. My favorite was a description of setting someone down in a outdoor setting, and electrodes hooked up to their head or heart, or maybe all over the place, and then electrodes separately connected with a nearby tree, in some beautiful sentinel tree, and the person that they hooked up electrodes to was an experienced meditator who knew how to immediately go into a heart-centered state where they're in their heart and sending love. And the second that they, I don't know how they signal with their finger or what, that they had gone into that state, it registered with the tree. So all these mysteries of interconnection in nature, that's what excites me.
So what are some of the potentials that you guys see with, say like healthcare advances in relation to all this?
Well, again, the plasma-related technologies are related to some of the outside-the-box advances in healthcare devices. Nikola Tesla had electrotherapeutic devices, and people like Dan Winter and I don't know if you know about Paul Harris, who invented a device called the Therapy.
I've heard of the Therapy. I think Dan Winter was the one that
using Dan Winter's geometry or some principle that he came up with, and then Paul's knowledge of plasma reactions and in a glass globes that you sit in between them in the field that emanates from these glowing globes, and it does interact with our cells at a very beneficial level. And there's another we mentioned in the book, Inventors, that are on the side working on something called the multi-wave oscillator. And again, it's all about vibrations, which Nikola Tesla said is key to understanding what's going on. So at the different conferences throughout the year, there were always the occasional speaker who spoke about some advance in understanding how we could heal our bodies using light or sound vibrations.
Has there been any, just to chime in, because I'm listening and taking all of it in, and correspondingly I'm kind of researching on a couple of the things you brought up. Has there been any research into the implications of this type of study based on health problems such as, addiction or mental illness or things like that? Right now where it seems like, quite limited, I think, in options. There's some groups that assist with dealing with trauma, because typically that's the underlying, issue with a lot of these addictions that outwardly present themselves. But with this type of study, have you looked into the benefits of, of this upon that field, I guess?
Well, I remember years ago when I'd interviewed a scientist, Dr. Yuri Kron, who's from Russia, double PhD, and now living in the U.S. and Oregon. And he was working with something that emanated sound that, as I remember, there were studies. He did, farm out some experiments to independent clinics, and that they were affecting emotional health. I'd have to look that up again and get back in contact with him and see. Susan, do you know anything about that aspect?
Well,
Guy?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. So there was a inventor. He had passed away about 2 years ago now, that had a device that people could go in. It was like an 8x8 octagon room, and so I'm going to get to the studies in a moment. But allegedly, I used it. I had my family use it as well several times, and spent on and off time with this gentleman, experiencing the device, but also, just chatting with him and the people that worked with him to really understand, what was happening and what was going on here. They would have people from a local medical school that was nearby bring some of their toughest patients, the patients that didn't have hope left, to sit in this device to feel it and to experience it. What I was told is that, and by the way, this gentleman had this device for many years. It wasn't just like a one-off type of a thing. And, we're talking years and years. A lot of people knew about this device and would go there, but, you didn't share it too much publicly because, you didn't want somebody coming in and saying, because the big problem in this field is you can't say that you're curing something. You do that, you get, right, from your legal background, you get in trouble. So what they had to do is they were in the beginning keeping records of everything when they started taking in clients. I'll just say, I won't say the word patient, but they had records, but then they had to literally stop it because they could have gotten in trouble. And I think someone was sniffing around at one point, to try to shut them down, just the typical thing that happens. But I have not seen people make any claims. I've seen, it's almost like if you want to be able to get some of these devices out, you say, and I think the Therafied does this, and Jeane, maybe you can correct me on this, that this is not, there's no claims made for this. This is just for, kind of like optional wellness, right? But you can't make any type of medical claims in regards to this. So you see people that are quite averse to writing anything down as it relates to it. And, that's a shame in one way, because you can't get good information, good data, good research. But on the other hand, it's a matter of, I think, keeping it safe. I will say this, because this always sticks in my mind as being very interesting. There was a gentleman that would go in this device that had, and this is a story, so I'm sharing something with you that I heard, obviously, from the inventor, that an individual that had ALS, advanced stage ALS, which is a very, very devastating neurological disorder, and when he would go in this device, all of his symptoms would go away. So he'd spend an hour in this device, and he could move his body, he could move his head around. I mean, he was able to have movement, right? But when he would come out of the device within a short period of time, the effects would fade. So it was his chance to get this respite, right? To feel what health felt like. And obviously he couldn't stay in this device all the time, but that's interesting. It's very interesting that that's a story that was shared, and my God, families that have, these devastating illnesses that affect them, these neurological illnesses, to not get that type of research is such a crime, for us to have to hold that back, right, for fear of creating and developing something that has the potentiality to potentially, cure somebody, and to help us further understand what is happening and what is going on with these devices when people enter in sick, and they're healthy when they're in there, and then when they come out into a different field of energy, they're back to where they were. So I wish I could give you more information on it, but this is the nature of the reality of what we're seemingly dealing with.
Right. Yeah,
I see something on the therapy.net website where an anesthesiologist from South Africa, who's a physician, has a testimonial. And again, this is just a story, but this doctor reports on having been in a condition of great stress, but then after being on the therapy, heart healing both physically and emotionally. So that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And when you were talking about that device that you went inside, it reminded, I think Eric Dollard had mentioned something about the Koski Rejuvenation Station or something along those lines. Is that related in any way, to your knowledge?
Multi-wave oscillator, yeah.
Yeah, there was the principles of that in the device that was in, I'll just say it was in New York. That was, yes, so one of the principles of the device was that, but there was other aspects that the inventor brought into it.
Interesting. And then it brings to mind a story that Peter Lindemann shared with me about a burn victim had used something called the spectrochrome system. And he was telling me about the different, I think he said the purple shade of the lens that they used with that had like pretty significant healing properties to it. And I don't know if that's something that's easily available for people. I think it's probably something maybe that just kind of fell away. But yeah, it's definitely interesting that there are these technologies out there that seem to have benefits, but it's just
I used to hear talk about something called the purple plate. So I don't know if that was one of Tesla's inventions, but
this was he called it was called the spectrochrome system, and it used different glass tinted, just a tinted glass. It was using color healing related technologies, and it had to be used with a certain type of dye, I believe, in order to have the right kind of light effect or something along those lines. But really interesting.
Very
These are
interesting.
directly related to the energy generators, because both the healing and the energy breakthroughs do could potentially disrupt business as usual with pharmaceuticals and big energy.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just on the purple topic, because the light that was emanating from this device was purple, in the one that was in New York. So I'm not sure if there's a relationship to that, but now after this knowing, I'm going to figure out if there is. I think that's something that we'll look at.
I'm going to go ahead and I'll let Ashley ask any questions. Do you have any other comments or questions that you?
No, maybe, I mean, mainly just on the pharmaceuticals that, yeah, I mean, right now you've got all of these, mental health issues, diseases, things that pharmaceuticals, try to, push out there. I used to work for a children's shelter when I was in undergrad, and I would say about 80 to 90% of those children were placed on some sort of mental health medication. The concern, with this in this field is, brains don't develop for children until the age of 23, some as late as 25, 28 years old before they're fully developed. So, it's concerning because we're dealing with a real problem that, we're using a medication or different medications that have so many disclaimers, and we don't know exactly, quote unquote, how it works, right? But we believe it does this, this, and this. And so it's, it's one of those things that it encourages me to see groups of people or people in this field of sciences tackling this problem, because the more that we can come up with alternative solutions that are, not drastically changing the brain chemistry before we quite understand what's going on, I think we're better off. So I certainly appreciate the field of study that you guys are engaging in, and it'll be interesting to see, what else kind of comes out of it. So,
Ashley, could I add something else on that line?
Of course.
The causes of, and I've read that the teenage depression has maybe tripled or something. I can't remember how many years, but so recently there's just a lot more depression in both adults and especially in teenagers. Well, I think the narrative that's being spread about how gloomy and hopeless the future is part of the cause.
Right.
I was invited on the weekend to talk to a local group of, you probably heard of the Extinction Rebellion group.
I have not.
Never heard of them.
Well, they're becoming a force internationally of people who spread the information about everything that's going wrong in the world in regards to extinction of species and everything. All information that's grounded, but there's no counterbalance of hope in their messages. Maybe just a little added on at the end of a presentation. Oh, here's what you can do. But I was in this room in the city's library and looked around, and there was a teenage girl who looked so depressed. She looked like she was just going to slump right into the table and expire. I mean, it was so sad. So I think the message that there are solutions, they're not going to be a cure-all. We have lots to do to get humankind back in harmony with nature. So the energy inventions are only a tool, but boy, they're a powerful tool for changing the status quo of the way we do things. So they're not giving out a full picture, a rounded message. They're just hammering on the messages that create fear and depression and feelings of hopelessness.
I could not agree with you more. Yeah. It's funny that you talking about that. It reminds me, literally, we have two children that we raise very differently. I try to get them outside and let their computer time because, there's so much that human beings need from being together in society in different ways, being outside, letting the sun actually, shine down on your body and taking in that vitamin D versus going and getting a supplement and, well, I'll just get this from this vitamin. My son was, recently saying, hey, I think I'm really depressed. And I come from a history of having a very positive upbringing. My father raised me telling me you can do anything you set your mind to. And I believed it. Part of that self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, that happens. And so I said to my son, why don't we just sit outside on the bench in the sun for a few minutes and tell me how you feel? So we went outside and, we've got flowers in the little garden bed, and we just sat in the sun. And after about 5 minutes, I looked at him and I said, how do you feel? And he goes, I feel a lot better, Mom. And he's 12. And I think that part of the problem as well is that, as a society, rather than focusing on a positive solution for these simple things, and experimenting, it's not going to hurt to just try something, sitting outside in the sun for 5 minutes, different things, these alternative energies and things like that. But being open-minded, and I think viewing it in a different way than, like you said, where it's stigmatized and, well, teens are just rapidly being more depressed, and it's not really focusing on, okay, well, we can fix this, but let's focus on that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I just want
wise mother.
Very well said. Very well said. One of the things that Jeane and I have a strong commonality on, I mean, the technology is one thing, but it's nature. It's the connection to nature.
absolutely.
And the thing is, if we can create technologies that are in alignment with nature, how would this world change? Because part of what seems to be causing this depression and disconnection is that the trees are being taken down, the water is being contaminated, the food is contaminated, right? I mean, we're staring at screens constantly, and it's this disconnection. We're not meant to be disconnected like that. We're meant to be connected, and it's this immense love and this innate connection to this life force that we feel. And this is why we do what we do. And Jeane, I don't want to speak for you, but I know that this is it. This is at the heart of why we do what we do, because even the air around us, like the EMFs, and you've got radiation, you've got that happening. I mean, that's real stuff. And to not talk about it is to not be intelligent and to not care, right? I mean, we're people just blindly go through life. But what is the sun? What is that energy that's coming from the sun, and why does it feel so good? Right? Why do we look at the stars and it is so amazing that we're feeling this life force? And I think that that's something that is innate in us that hasn't had a chance to really be explored. And being able to be your own healer, right? That you don't need to really maybe you don't need to have prescription meds. Maybe they do more harm than good. And maybe there are solutions that we can utilize that are from nature, more purely and more directed. I mean, the indigenous have done this. The indigenous still do this. And so I feel like there's so much that we have to learn, but really this comes to the capacity to be connected to nature and to create technologies that are in alignment with Mother Earth and the cosmos. And I think, alluding to what Sky said earlier, you're talking about ships, whether they are ours or someone else's. Let's say that they're someone else's, and there's something magnificent that we see with that booming life energy, that comes from that flash in the sky, or you see it, shift and goes in multiple different directions. Well, maybe that's an extension of the natural life force that's in the cosmos that the Earth feels as well. So, I think that's what we're talking about. And as Jeane said, and I want to echo this, very wise mother, to be able to continue to create that connection, because that to me is what it's all about.
It's really living. It just, that's the only time. I mean, there's so many people that have so many things that they have to worry and stress about and get done because we're oversaturated with
Mm-hmm.
tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's something that we try to hold on to, is just keeping that grounded outlook, and really going out in nature. That's how I get my escape from my casework because it can be
Me
stressful.
too.
And it's so needed. So I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you guys do gardening, but we do that as well, and we love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you believe it that some people actually think that seeing something in virtual reality is just the same as enjoying nature's beauty in real life? I mean, it may be mind-blowing 3D, but it doesn't. You don't get the feeling of connection. You
No,
don't put your
not at
arms around
all.
a tree that gives you messages back.
Right, right. It's very disconnected. Yeah. And that's the challenge, is I think with individuals who, now more and more, many people, that's primarily what they know. So it's very hard for them to comparatively say, well, I was out in nature and I really enjoyed this hike, or I really enjoyed, being by the ocean, getting my feet in the sand. If they've not done that because they're so distracted by the technology and being in those virtual worlds, it's really hard for them to realize what they're missing and what their bodies are craving. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Got to get those negative ions, right?
Heck yeah.
Love it.
Well,
They're there.
yeah, definitely. Well, I'm gonna ask you guys a couple questions to end this on. So who is a favorite inspirational teacher or great thinker that you admire, and why? And I'll go ahead and I'll start with you, Susan.
Uh, hmm. Oh boy, this may sound kind of cliche, but it's so true. And it's not anyone that you know, but it would be my dad. My father was an incredible light, and he was a teacher because he was a man that showed great empathy and great compassion, but had tremendous integrity and humor. And I don't see that often enough. And so he is someone that I always think of what would he do in certain situations, because they always seem to have the right answer. And I think if we were living in a different community, my dad would be like the kahuna. He'd be like the people that, people would go to him to get their problems solved, because he was so good at that. And for me, I would love to say it has, it's someone else, one of these other greats. But you asked me a question I wasn't prepared for, and that's who comes into mind. And a great teacher, and to this day he passed away a couple years ago. So to this day, I can still, reach in and feel him, and know he's there in the ethers, and providing some insight still.
That's
Beautiful.
amazing.
And how about for you, Jeane?
I could talk about a spiritual teacher, but we really don't have time for all that. I will talk about somebody that we wrote a chapter about in our book, Victor Schauberger, because of the way he studied how energy moves in nature. He was an Austrian forester who spent years out in a pristine forest of a size that there just aren't any anymore, hill after hill covered with forest, and rivers that flow unimpeded by even logging roads. It was a special laboratory that he had to study. And so the life force was very evident to him. And then he used those principles that he learned about to make some technologies that were harmony with nature. But really, for wisdom, we have people living and helping us right today. And I would say that people like Peter Lindemann have a good serving of wisdom. He's been a teacher for me, and I can generally count on him to have a broad perspective that's not of self-interest, but rather of the big picture.
Yep. Both of them are pretty inspirational, in my opinion. Well, before we close it out, are there any last comments or thoughts that you guys would like to share with listeners?
I guess I'll go first. I think what I'd like to share with the listeners is that there is more and more momentum in this arena, which is amazing. I mean, I wish I could share the emails that we get on a daily basis, all of them. We do have everyone in a system, by the way, just to keep everybody organized, but they're from all walks of life, in the sense of different experiences, different education levels, different parts of the world. Then they all feel a call to show up and to participate in some way. And it's just beautifully encouraging. We have had 2 people in, I would say, the last couple of months want to donate their IP. One individual is getting up there in age and said, I've been sitting on this for a while, and I would like to be able to donate what I have here. Don't want anything from this. I just want it to be used for good. I want it to be used to help people that are in the greatest need. So, when you see this type of shift and this type of change happening, that's when you realize that as tough as some things are with what's going on in the world, and especially if you look on social media, or even if you look on obviously mainstream news, things look pretty crazy. But there is this undercurrent that's happening where, as tough as things are, there's also this great light that seems to be emerging and showing itself through. And that's one of the things I'd like to share, because that's the beauty of when I open up my email in the morning and I see what I see. It's more of the collaboration, more of the giving, less of the self-interest, and more of how can I show up, and how can I participate, and how can I share. And it's beautifully encouraging.
Beautiful. Did you want to chime in, Jeane, or?
Yes, I would just like to read the last 4 sentences of our book, Hidden Energy. The last chapter is about what people can do to bring it into our world. And the final paragraph is, your personal hidden energy can be as transformative to your world as any technology powered by the universal energy. In what small alcoves of your life can you replace anger with love? Our call to action is to be the consciousness shift, as well as to support the clean energy transition in whatever way you can. As the first step, just imagine, in detail and with heartfelt gratitude, living in a harmonious civilization on a regenerated earth.
Wow. That's beautiful. Well, where would you like to direct people to learn more about what you guys are doing?
I'd say to hiddenenergy.org. So www.hiddenenergy.org. People can get an idea of the book, and there's links there that they can go to Amazon or Friesen's Press to be able to get a copy of the book in both e-form and in paper or hardcover. So that would be a great place. And if they want to learn more about New Energy Movement, it's www.newenergymovement.org.
Alrighty.
And Jeane, did you want to give any other websites?
No, that's
okay. All right, great.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight, and this was great.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please feel free to leave a positive review on iTunes, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel. I've recently uploaded all of the previous episodes onto that, and there will be many more to come. So thank you again, and you're greatly appreciated.